Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mr. Leon Artwork. Today we're doing Link versus Ganon, so I take into account the references I'm using on the left, upper left corner, and here I'm just trying to figure out what perspective I want to lay Link as, so you'll see me kind of drawing in and then erasing, trying to feel comfortable with the drawing itself. So here I'm going ahead and laying down where I think I want my character to be as I kind of shape his legs, his arms, his sword, and his head into the drawing itself, trying to get the perspective right. I wanted a bit of an action pose, kind of a defense kind of pose from Link, trying to defend himself from Ganon, for example. So here, since I kind of laid down where I wanted the perspective, I'm starting to add in the details with the head first, and then working my way down from there. I wanted his hat to kind of be waving in the air, so I kind of added a curve to it as well. Just making sure I get the details down of the iconic wear that that Link always has. In this case, I'm drawing in the references with his sword sheath, and as well as the clothing he's wearing as well, the iconic green clothing. Link isn't prone to wearing too much armor when it comes to this, so I'm just making sure I'm putting down the details in his arm guards as well. I wanted to add a little bit of waving in his clothes, so I wanted the clothes to move along with what his legs were kind of doing at the bottom. Once I have everything where I want it to be, then I start adding in the details, kind of make it a little bit more permanent before actually going over it with the black pen itself. So now that we're finished basically with Link, I wanted to go ahead and add in kind of like an action move from Ganondorf. So I started off with his sword first to kind of lay it down where I wanted it, and I wanted it to go against Link's shield. At first, I wanted him to hold the sword two-handed, but then later on I changed my mind, and since he's a bigger character, I only added one hand to the hilt of the sword and moved the other hand up. So here I'm drawing a crown that he's kind of seen with sometimes, and the armor, it's like this purplish armor that he wears. So here's where I decide that I only want one hand. And here's where I place the second hand up top to kind of show him kind of pushing the sword into the shield. Placing in his golden arm guards, Ganondorf is referenced like you see him in the left top hand corner. Adding in his belts and the details within his belts as well. Placing where I want his legs to go, overlapping over Link's foot, so that's why I erased it. Kind of give it a 3D feel to it. Now that I have them kind of laid down where I want them to go, now I start adding in the permanent pen, so that way I'm going over what I want to stay on the page, and also at the same time, while I'm making this permanent, I'm also going over it with an eraser, so I'm erasing any lines I do not want within the drawing itself. To outlining Ganondorf. It's a little time consuming just because the character is a little bigger than Link and has a little bit more detail, I guess you could say, within the armor. Adding in the darker black lines, of course, makes the drawing pop out a little bit more compared just to adding colors by themselves. Going over with the eraser, taking out any lines I do not want and adding in the lines I might have missed. Then we choose our colors, and I wanted to go ahead and start out with the yellows first because there's a lot of yellow actually depicted throughout the drawing, so it's not only in Link's hair and sheath, but it's also on most of Ganondorf's armor. I'm going through and first adding the brightest yellow I could find to kind of give that sheen representation of gold. And afterwards I'll be going over it with a darker shade of yellow as well, and that's only to basically add a more depth into the actual yellow lining themselves, giving it more of a goldish feel to it, because gold doesn't reflect the same way when you're kind of rotating it within light. It's depending on the perspective, you get a different shine from it from different angles. Once that's done, we basically move on to what I wanted to do. The most was basically start painting in Link's clothing, the iconic green, I guess you could say. Starting out with the lightest greens, of course, and then moving my way into the darker greens to give it that 3D-ish effect that I want. Basically, I'm pressing a little bit harder where I want the shading to be, so that way the color comes out darker where I've pressed a little bit harder against the paper. Adding in the browns, which is basically his arm guards, his gloves, and his boots. Afterwards, moving into tans in order to start coloring in his sleeves and I guess you could say his pants as well. And as well, I'll go a little bit darker to add the shading kind of details to it. This same blue that I'm adding to the actual sheath itself is the same blue I'll be using to color in Ganondorf's armor as well. Adding in the skin color and moving in with the blue with Ganondorf's armor. The reason I'm adding blue in this case first is because the purple on his actual armor kind of has that gleamish kind of blue at the very core of it. You'll notice that these colors, this color blue won't actually stick around as I will be going over it with the purple colors. And you'll see that kind of bluish fade away and turn into that kind of sheen that the reference kind of portrays. It's almost like the blue is the base reflection of the color purple. Once I've added that shade, I add a darker shade of purple for the shading. Adding in shading with darker colors, which is the black, which is the same colors I'm going to use to color in the furs, the pants, and the colors that are in between, like in the gloves. Pressing it in different, I guess you could say pressing it at different hardness against the paper will cause obviously the coloring pencil to go into dark blacks and grays, so a black coloring pencil could be both black and gray. Here I'm adding in kind of like an army green kind of tint to his skin, and I will be adding another color to it as well to give it more depth, which is basically just the black shading. The black coloring pencil tends to be the coloring pencil I use most. Here it's time to start adding the reds where it needs to be red, which is basically the cape that he has at his waist, and then moving on to oranges Once I'm done with the darker reds, to the hair. I add a light orange before moving into the darker colors, which I want to add a tint of red to it, so I will be adding a bit of red over the orange after I've reached a place that I like with the orange. Kind of giving him that fire hair look to him. Laying down the color for where Link is actually on. I guess you could say he's like kind of like on a platform, just kind of like a cliff, small little cliff side. And I add in the shading just to make sure it looks like he's actually standing on it. Now I want to start with the background. I wanted to add the little fairy that glows blue. That's kind of like the extra life and the kind of the helper for Link. And I wanted to add in the moon from Majorasmask as well. Adding in the craters with the lighter grays before I move into the darker colors. Adding in the shading relative to the actual reference itself. Darkening the craters, the mouth, around the eyes.
Listen.
Here's the blue for the fairy, and adding in the color to the eye. Yellows, oranges, reds, and black. Once I'm basically done with that, I start filling in the background with the black because I want it to be kind of symbolizing that it's kind of night. So I'll go ahead and fill up any white spots with the black coloring pencil. And first I kind of shade it in lightly, and then I start pressing in harder to get those darker blacks, I guess you could say. Adding in any details I feel I missed. Shading is key for 3D. Time to start going in darker. I felt this dark black would help all characters pop out from the background itself. So there we go. Basically, this is how to draw Link versus Ganondorf. I hope you like, share, and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching.